At least you get extra time to read the note well, which is fascinating. So, who wants to volunteer to be the note taker? Anyone? Anyone? Maybe the next person who walks in the door will stick with that. If nobody walks in the door. I think that you've just volunteered to be the note taker, haven't you?
That's what I heard. Actually, the next person was. So I was done
Actually, we said that about 3 minutes ago. It was just an echo that you heard. So yeah, if we don't get a note taker, we're probably going to be stuck. So then again, there's only like 5 people here. Joel jabber. Joel always jabbers. Jim.
Jabber well, and that
Jim cannot.
Correct.
Woohoo! You have just been volunteered to take notes.
Thank you.
Is that okay? Can you take notes? Okay. They don't need to be good notes. Thank you. So this obviously is the IETF note well. Presumably everybody has seen it multiple times by now. Please note it well. There should be some blue sheets going around. I don't think we're going to run out of space on the blue sheets. This is Ops area, and I am neither of these 2 people, so I will get the hell out of the way. I'm just the slide monkey. What do you want? Yang model?
All right, so on the agenda for the Ops area, we've got like the Yang coordination, an update, then also an update on, oh, it's in there, on the L3VPN service Yang model. It's a new working group. Then Kathleen will present on DOTS, and we will have Jan Medved presenting something on the outcome of the hackathon during the weekend, at least some of the part that involves Ops. So any agenda bashing? All right, then I'll start with the Yang model coalition group update.
It's yellow again. Ugh. Does anybody really hate the yellow? Okay. As I said, we might never stop fiddling with the video cables and stuff. It did? I've tried another adapter. It seems to be something in the VGA side of the connector, I think, because it... Oh, it's actually the cable. Yeah, if I hold the cable like this, it's just fine, so... Woohoo!
All right, so good afternoon. I'll be speaking about the Yang model coordination group. So what is this? Next slide. This is basically a directorate of a couple of people. We've got in there Karl Morberg, Dejan Bogdanovic, Dave Meyer, and Deborah. But Deborah was selected as the new routing AD, so this is between brackets, meaning that she won't have much time to do this any longer. This is, we were quite happy to have an operator in that group, so if you are an operator, for example, walking in a room and wanted to spend some time on this, you are more than welcome.
You know it, I'll do it.
So there is a small time commitment. We put in there like 1/3 of someone's time just to make sure that we're serious about it. You know, some weeks it's 0, some more weeks like this week it's full-time job. But what is the mission of this group is, you know, to help with the development and coordination of the numerous Yang models within the IETF and the promotion of Yang modeling in the industry. So I'll come back to that in a couple of slides. Now, This is the page there. Feel free to follow that one. We have a wiki there with plenty of information, and we're linking this with the routing connection group. Yeah. All right, so I won't be reading all this, but typically the job description is like an inventory of Yang models. The first thing we want to do, then trying to evaluate how all these Yang models fit together. This is a good problem to have. It's the next thing we will need to do. And you will see that there are many of these Yang models. If you were in the routing session just before, it's also discussed there. There is a design team in routing to evaluate how to fit these models together. So documenting and tracking open issues, leading the discussions on, the resolution and open issues, participating in the design teams. And that's it, basically. We're going to learn along the time how this job will evolve, but it's really the promotion of Yang. Now, on the next slide, what I want to show is a couple of outcome, what we've been doing so far, because we want to give regular updates. The first thing was the inventory. Yes, we've been telling that there is like a big wave of Yang models or even a tsunami, but actually how many? It's even difficult to know. So what we did in the hackathon during the weekend with Jan Medved is we wrote a script that download the IETF draft, extract the Yang models, and see if they compile, right? So we have this page there, and you could throw the link directly from the page I mentioned before. So you see on the left-hand side the module name, then where it comes from, which draft, then a link to the author. You want to just click and send an email to them with what? With the outcome of the compilation there that failed, right? And just checking there if it passed or failed. And on the next slide, some numbers. So how many Yang models do we have? Well, we have to differentiate between the one that extracts correctly and the one that might be good Yang models. So we run that this morning. We've got like 118 Yang models in the IETF. The one that extract correctly. Out of these, only 28 just passed the compilation. We should improve that, right? There are some of the error in there I could agree with. That's fine. And it's very simple binary outcome. It passes, there is no return string, or it doesn't pass. Now, from this morning, I think it was 218 total Yang models, the good one, the bad one, the one we're not too sure, the example ones, etc. So there is room for improvement there. Right now, this is on my private website. The plan is to move that somewhere, maybe the IETF website, whatever. But the code for that is being posted at this time in GitHub, so it will be available for people to just reuse. On the next slide, typical error there. I won't go there in details, but the typical one, you're supposed to put code begins and code ends there. Some people don't put that, so we're not too sure if it's an example or not. There are Yang models in draft that are just examples, so it's right not to put that. But just don't use like code begin instead of code begins. Don't use a lowercase instead of put the and at the end. All these things, we've been warning all the authors, please correct that. Okay, I'll skip the rest. Oh, by the way, don't put XXX there. I mean, if you're not too sure about your Yang module name, right, every single person put XXX. So we've got 5 or 6 XXX Yang models. That doesn't help, right? Okay, next slide. So posting the code is being done right now. We want to integrate this tool with ID nets, right? Specifically because there is like an --IETF compilation flag in Pyang. Now, I'm not sure that we want to just fail posting a draft if you fail the compilation, right? Because some of the mistakes in there might be valid, it might be work in progress, fair enough. But at least we want to show, okay, please make sure you have reviewed the Pyang output for the IETF before posting. And what we want to do, because if you recall the first slide, it's about promoting Yang in the industry. We've got plenty of Yang models that are outside the IETF, right? And we've got some in different SDOs, some in open source. And we wanted to do something similar for Open Daylight. Last time we checked, it was like 300 or 400 Yang models in there. Obviously, that's a superset of the one we have here, but, you know, still valid point. All right, the next one. As I mentioned, we've got plenty of Yang models all over the place. We have on that website, following the wiki there, a kind of industry landscape of what's happening in the different SDOs. MEF is doing some Yang models. The IEEE, they have a PAR to create Yang models. Cable Labs, Open Daylight, ETCNFV. You know, I'm not married to the IETF, right? As long as it's consensus-based and it's good modeling, that's fine with me, and vendor neutral, by the way. So we're in the process of establishing all the contacts, and I'm not a strong believer in liaison. You know, I can imagine sending a liaison to the Open Daylight, people will laugh at it. I'm just more a believer into building bigger communities. So that's what we're trying to do right now. And this hackathon this weekend was about that. You will hear about what we did with Jan later on. For the people involved in different SDOs, please review this and please comment if the status is right. All right, next slide, the outcome number 3. These days, it seems that I spend a lot of my meeting time discussing Yang. That's a good problem to have, but most of the time it boils down to having the right terminology. Like, okay, what do you mean with a service? Is this a network service? Is this a business service? What about, you know, protocol Yang models? What about standard one? What about standard extension? What about proprietary extension to standard model? What about proprietary model? And I advise you to review this document, which is draft Bogdanovich there. That's going to be pretty useful for all these discussions within the IETF, like, for example, in the super BOF, but also outside of the IETF, right? All right, that's it on this one. Then training. I heard many times that we need training on NetConf and Yang, and at different level, right? And that makes sense. Now, we're working with this group on having a training online that would, you know, be useful for multiple audiences. First one, what is this NetConf and Yang anywhere, right? I heard it's cool, it's the right thing to do these days, but what is this? First audience. The second one is, I would like to develop a Yang model, right? Can you help me? Then the third one is coding. I'm coding around Yang models. Which libraries, tools, etc. do you have? And a fourth one that we've been discussing today with Yari is, what if I would be someone in Open Daylight and I would like to, you know, just create an IETF draft, or what should I do? And Jan will be discussing that because we addressed part of this in the hackathon. The project started. We received some funding to just get some professional editing of these trainings. So you are going to see that and hopefully provide feedback. We're trying to get like a training that could be extended with more things along the time. On the outcome number 5 on the next slide. Now, one of the big questions is, at least in my mind, is, yes, I see a lot of Yang models all over the place. And we could just be happy. But I'm wondering, are we actually standardizing the right Yang models? What for? For the operators, right? So I've been asking some of the operators that I know in the IETF, tell me which one you're missing, which one we should be working on, right? And there are two types of Yang models. There are the one that are services one and the one that are below an orchestrator, right? I'm mainly interested into these. Like, okay, sure, we've got one on ISIS and one on OSPF, one, but, you know, trying to identify the gaps in what we're doing in the IETF is key. So typically something like having a technology and this RFC. So it's not terribly useful to say support IPv6, right? But tell me, I would need to have the configuration state and the operational state of that RFC. And then if we would match what we've been doing at the beginning, right, with the inventory and the list, the requirements from the operators, we could see what is missing, okay? And again, the inventory should be in multiple SDOs and open source projects. So that's the goal. So please drop me an email if you have that type of information. And next one. Oh, and that's it. Yeah.
So, Eric Osborne, level 3. Can you go back to your previous slide? It would be kind of cool to get a what not to standardize, some guidelines. You know, we'll talk about this with the services thing later, but I at least in the IP MPLS space, people have always walked this fuzzy line of trying to put out RFCs for features that don't need interop. And now I can see people churning out Yang models for things that don't need them, for services, for stuff that doesn't make sense to a lot of us. It'd be kind of cool to have some guidelines about at least the priority in which the IETF wants to develop certain kinds of Yang models.
I fully agree with that. If you could go back to the outcome 2, I think. No, it was the 3 then. Number 3. This is my answer. Exactly for that reason, I want to have a terminology. Like, what is a network service? What is a business service? And by the way, I don't believe we should be doing any business service model in the IETF. So this terminology will help me discussing with different SDOs. And like with the MEF, they have a different notion of service. Okay, you will do that part of the service, we'll do the networking part, if any, a few of them in the IETF. So yes, I'm relying on this to have that discussion, and I fully agree with you. We should not be all the services in the world in the IETF. Maybe a few of them, and I'll discuss that in the L3SM talk.
Eric Voigt.
I think that mic doesn't work. Okay.
Eric Voigt, I think one of the good things that would be worthwhile adding is not just what the Yang model is and how to use it, but the ideas of what are you going to use it for. For example, the interface model, there's so many uses for it. Some are very high volume, some are very low volume, some need little bits of the model, others should be pushed. So while we can come up with the models, I often find that the usages, even in the cross-reference that you had before, are extremely different in terms of volume, scale, and other types of information. So it would be helpful to the operators to get an idea of when you like a model, what are you going to do with it?
Okay, so Eric, have we done that with the MIPS, like the interface MIP? Or, I mean, what is different with Yang compared to MIPS? Because I don't think that we've been doing that with MIP modules. They are somehow self-explanatory.
Agreed. It gets back into what's the difference between configuration data and operational data. And for configuration, certainly you're going to have expected volumes, and even then, you know, for ACL configuration, sometimes you run into blocking factors of how many ACLs you can add or remove. When we start doing things like NITRS, with actually getting the route updates and the route flaps in real time, and you're expecting that out of, let's say, some interface and routing Yang model, you're going to get a lot different behavior as the topology changes for one thing versus another. So, or even the discussions we're having on push. Are you going to use this model for push versus not? These kind of things are interesting. I mean, the information model is great. How you use it to dimension scale in other ways.
Presentation or next slide?
And I'm next too. And what we've been discussing about the services model is the perfect introduction for this. It's an L3 VPN service model. It's a new working group, L3SM. One of the questions I've been having for some time now is, should we standardize service Yang models in the IETF? To come back to Eric's point before. And should we standardize any service Yang model at all? Now, what we did on the next slide is that we had a design team of only operators, no vendors in there. And we asked them, could you please try to see if there are some commonalities into your configuration of an L3 VPN, right? And could you try to get us a kind of information model in whatever, text, for example. And they worked together for bi-weekly meetings, and they came up with a draft on this. The draft is there. And they produced a Yang model out of this directly in 2.5 months. And somehow it was like a small proof of concept that we might be standardizing maybe a couple of services Yang models. So on the next slide, what I want to do is simply highlight a few things from the charter and explain the rationale behind this. This is a short-lived working group. You know, coming back to the first question, should we standardize service Yang model in the IETF? Let's try fast and fail fast, right? If there is no agreement amongst operators that, or at least no commonalities, we should not do it. Now, so it's a Yang model. It describes an L3 VPN service model that can be used for communication between customers and network operators. So whenever an operator asks his own customer, okay, what do you want? Do you want to have IPv4, IPv6 with topology, tenants, customers, etc.? This is at this level, right? Nothing else. So, all right, next one. We wanted to stress, I think you're missing.
Forward too?
Yeah.
Okay, they look the same, sorry.
It's yellow and yellow.
Yeah, yellow and lots of text and stuff. I mean,
Right, so we want to stress this is not an L3 configuration model. If you are a vendor and you try to put in there all the config knobs that you have for your L3 VPN and all aspects of that, an IGP, an access list, and a QoS, whatever, this is not what it is. So it's just between an operator and its customer. All right, the next one. So that will help me if we succeed with this, and I'm confident, because, you know, we've seen so many Yang models, but somehow the challenge we have right now is that they must work together. And we've got 3 types of Yang models. The one that are the services between typically a BSS and an OSS, /controller, /orchestrator, whatever the name, right? Then we've got the one that are configuring network elements. There are plenty of these in the IETF. And in the OSS, we've got like the topology-related ones. And all of these, they must work together, right? At the end of the day, we're creating all these protocol-specific Yang models, what for? For operators to create new services. That's why this L3 VPN is somehow a test. Can we have like this L3 VPN service model? Do we have all the building blocks that we need in configuring the network elements, right? And that would be a good test. All this should be coming together with the topology from I2RS in an orchestrator. So I want to use this like a homework, like does the IETF do his homework in terms of having the right Yang models standardized? And next one. So what you wrote in there is that this draft that those operators came up with should be considered as a good start, right? I believe this is a good start. Now, I say I believe because who am I to say that this is the right or the wrong questions that those operators are asking to their customers, right? And we have like an aggressive milestone. When I see what has been done in 3 months with this draft, and I believe this is a very good draft already, needs some improvements, needs some more feedback from multiple operators, that's for sure, then we want to just say, can we agree in, let's say, 1 year since we started with the design team on how to do a service? We fail, that's fine, and we won't do any service Yang models at all. No big deal, but I believe we'll succeed. So I think that's it. So any questions or feedback on this one? Yes, Eric.
Eric Osborne again. So I in true IETF fashion, didn't understand this and didn't like it at the same time. And so I spoke out against it in NetConf or NetMod or Net whatever it was. I have fewer pitchforks now because it makes more sense. But I do have a couple of concerns. You know, the objection I'd made the other day that I don't have as much anymore is that I don't think the IETF should be in the business of service models, right? We're not the ITU, and I don't think we should be. But the other thing that's going to stick is that if this is an RFC, especially if it's a proposed standard and turns into standard, then it's going to show up on RFPs. I don't get why it's a proposed standard instead of experimental, given what you've described. And it would be kind of cool if it had something in the top that said, this is not the model, this is a science experiment. You know, something like that. It just helps me if I don't actually want to implement this in the dashboard I give my customers or something like that. You know what I mean?
I understand, and I agree with that. Now, I mean, whenever you see, you tell me it's going to appear in RFP. Which ones? I mean,
from my customers to me, right? Do you support this and such Yang model?
And then you're going to say, no, but I've got something better based on this.
Yeah, but we all know that game doesn't work.
Okay. No, but I get your point. It's a valid one. I mean, I'm not married to Star Trek, right?
It feels like the definition of an experiment, which is good.
Okay.
Just an idea.
Jason Stern, Alcatel-Lucent. So if I understand correctly, in your classification model that Dan Bogdanovic did, this would sit up kind of above the orchestrator, not between the orchestrator and the nodes.
Exactly.
Okay, so that sounds good. I guess the other question I'd have is, it sounds like the right group of people to work on that is a set of operators. I guess I would one thing that would probably be important though is those operators are actually operating services using a wide variety of vendors. So if you had 5 operators involved, that sounds like it's a good set, but if they're all using one vendor, for example, to actually implement services, then the model may not represent enough, may not take into account enough variety in services models. So I would just encourage that group make sure that the operators have a variety of vendors on which they've implemented services in the network.
I would agree with that. Now I've got a question for you. So
Yep.
Do you believe that the operators would have different questions to their customers whenever enabling an L3 VPN based on the different vendors? And I don't speak about like the secret sauce, right, and the extension, but a very basic L3 VPN. Do you believe those questions would be different?
I think it's influenced by how different vendors see and construct services. So I think it's a mix. There's definitely stuff that's just purely between an operator and the customer, but sometimes the way services can be constructed right down on equipment does actually flow through and affect thinking about how services should be modeled. So I just wanted to make sure there's encouraged to make sure there's a wide variety of vendors being used by those operators.
Thank you.
And Kathleen was going to be presenting, I think, on dots, but I don't think I have a presentation, nor do we seem to have a Kathleen. So let me try and find the other presentation, which was just emailed to me. Pardon? Great. Do you need slides to talk? Great. You talk, I'll look.
Stand in the box.
Oh, the box. The box has been removed, so yes, stand there.
Right. Hi, my name's Nick Teague. I'm from VeriSign. Kathleen sponsored our BOF on DOTS. DOTS. I just wanted to spend a few minutes here just to raise awareness, really. DOTS stands for DDoS Open Threat Signaling. Our goal is to produce a standard way. It sort of sits between the security and the ops kind of areas. We wanted to produce a standard way for devices, on-premise DDoS devices that are currently sitting in many people's networks to be able to communicate up to other devices or service providers. And in that vein, we've created a draft, and we got the BOF going. And from the BOF, we've decided we obviously have the mailing list, and from that, we're talking about getting a working group going. So it's just basically to raise awareness. If you check out dots on IETF, if you check out dots at IETF mailing list, and if you're interested, please get involved. If you have anything to say on that, again, please hit me up.
Hi, Eric Osborne again. This idea of communicating denial of service, is it intended to be within a provider or some sort of inter-provider thing?
I probably wasn't very clear there. It's from a customer to a provider. So if I'm an enterprise and I've gone out and bought big shiny DDoS mitigation box #1, and I put that in my network, then I can only choose a service provider that also uses big shiny DDoS provider, service provider 1 equipment to signal to. If I'm using another one, I have a completely different set of providers that I can maybe go to. The idea is to open that up so that if I go and buy, I'm going to throw some brand names around. If I go and buy an Arbor, I can talk to, I don't know, VeriSign or Prolexic or whoever. If I go and buy a Radware, I can talk to Arbor. So that's what we're trying to do, is to try and break that vertical that's currently there, where you have, everything's kind of all, in a row all the way down.
Someone's going to run a Yang model for DDoS, right?
Yeah, I'm just waiting for the Yang model request that's going to go for the DDoS thing. Yeah, that'll be the next thing. But then again, so that we're looking at, it's more a signaling thing with this. But yeah, I mean, eventually somebody's going to want to do that, because we're going to be looking to export telemetry data, on the attack profile, just so the provider can do stuff that they should be doing.
I was only half kidding. I think that may be the right way to do, some sort of external NNI. Now.
Yeah, it could be, very much so.
Thanks.
Right. Cool. No words. And now, hackathon something. Oops. I don't know you're speaking on this? Great.
So I'll describe a few projects that we did at the hackathon over the weekend, the hackathon that Benoit mentioned in his talk. The first one that we did, or that a couple of people did, was import the IETF syslog model into Open Daylight running on Linux, and have actually Linux syslog files be configured over netconf, where basically Open Daylight acted as a netconf agent for a Linux box. These are the developers. There are 4 guys from 4 different companies. That in itself was really good. Demonstrated cooperation of different people from different environments, different parts of the world, getting together over the weekend and hacking out some code. And the goal was to implement the proposed Yang model and do the configuration of Linux. And it was done as an Open Daylight project, and it was implemented in Java. Next slide. So this is the model. It has a few parts for configuring logging actions, console logging actions, file logging actions, and so forth. A fairly simple model, but it uses some of the advanced concepts that like identities and choices and so forth. So it's a well-written and kind of fast maturing model. Next slide. Then the demo was basically they did the code, they implemented and debugged and tested, and then demonstrated over a GUI, adding some configuration and then showing it in the configuration file. And the results are in the hackathon wiki. And also, the code already has been posted in tutorials in the Open Daylight tutorials repository. So it's, in addition to being a kind of useful little utility, it's also a great example of how to import models into Open Daylight. Now, if you go to the next slide, this shows an auto-generated GUI from a model, from the syslog model, where the fields that are defined by the model are put into a GUI, and an operator or a programmer can immediately use the GUI that is generated from the model. This is a feature of Open Daylight. So as we progress with the modeling activities, you will see a lot of automation tools emerging both in open source and probably in commercial as well, that can generate APIs, REST APIs, GUIs, and so forth out of models. And this was a really good example. When you take a model, you can have a GUI generated out of that, immediately usable GUI right out of the bat. They didn't have to write a single line of code for the GUI. Next slide. And this is a kind of a neat little tool that just, again, built into Open Daylight. So you take the model and you visualize it as a graph. Basically, it's a graph visualization tool. And in this case, you can see the different types in the model and the different leaves and the different, you can at one, kind of one shot see a structure of your model. And we imported a bunch of other models as well, like the BGP OpenConfig model. It's a little bit more complex than this. And so we can, again, start using some of these tools to assess the couplings and bindings and relationships between different attributes and different containers and different parts of your model in one big picture. Next slide. Another really nice project was service function chaining and netconf. The issue, there were 6 developers, but I only got the names of the 2, and I apologize to the ones that were there and are not mentioned here. But what I wanted to do is automate the process of device discovery in a SDN controller, and then mapping those devices into service function chaining, or into services chaining application running on Open Daylight. So, and they use the netconf devices to do the auto discovery and the mapping. And again, like, they managed to bring the whole thing up over the weekend and demonstrate it, and you can see the video of the demonstration on this slide here. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay. Then another project was a tools project to create an RFC template out of a Yang model. So the starting point is a Yang model, and then basically create all the boilerplate text for a new draft out of that Yang model. And again, there were a couple guys working on this over the weekend, and they demonstrated a nice GUI where you upload a Yang model and out comes an RFC to XML template out of it. And then the final project was Benoit's and mine, and we did that extraction tool that Benoit already described. So next slide. Next slide and next slide. Next. That one? Yes. So the hackathon overall, I mean, there were, in addition to the netconf projects, there were other projects as well, about 5 or 10 of them, something like that, in that order. And it was a great success, and a lot of really good code got hacked out. And the hackathon will be repeated at IETF 93 in Prague on the weekend before IETF. And again, like the emphasis will be on open source and standards, and where open source and standards overlap, or where they have a common intersection. Any questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Oh, I have an open mic thing, I think. If you want to. I don't know where our main slides have gone.
So now this is the open mic session for any topic that you would have for the ops area. So topic for the full array itself. After that, we're going to have the ops LWG meeting.
Al Morton. I'd just like to briefly mention, and I'll back away from the microphone because the echo here is tremendous, that we, Kathleen Moore, oh, she's on the agenda.
You just heard her.
What do you mean I just heard her?
She was substituted for.
Okay. So I walked in late, obviously. But this draft is something we're looking for comments on, and the discussion is under the SAG list.
Oh, sorry. There we go. Stupid cable.
So that's good. Okay, it's covered. Excellent. Thanks very much.
Lee Howard, since we're open mic time. We did an experiment in V6 Ops this week. We'd kind of done it a little bit before, where we invited speakers to give sort of deployment experience field reports on protocols that have been standardized at the IETF and actually get operators who are running those protocols to come and tell us how they're going. And we've had really positive feedback on that. And so I wanted to encourage my other people in the area to both, if you can find time on an agenda to do that, give it a try, but also looking for what other things we ought to be looking for in V6 Ops to ask for feedback on, and especially if you know somebody who has deployed something that maybe we don't know what the experience is like. Good feedback for us to then write further drafts. Thanks.
Then thank you, and we'll leave the table for Warren and Scott for the Ops WG.
So hello, this is now Ops AWG.
Vast difference.
Yep. Here is the note well again. It should be identical to what it was when you walked in a few minutes ago. Where's us? Whoever's taking minutes, will you mind continuing to take minutes for the rest of this? And also please don't forget to send us minutes at the end. Although I can't remember who is taking minutes. Who is taking minutes? Would you mind putting up a hand? Okay, great. Joel is as well. Okay, blue sheets. Hopefully those are already circulating. This is the administrivia section. Then we're going to have an update by Chris Grundman. Do I have your slides? Okay, great. And then cap-up control and data separation for multi-provider scenario. A quick update on our documents since the last meeting. We have 2 new RFCs, 7 working group documents, 1 of which is active. 2 of them have completed working group last call. Actually, that's no longer correct. The SHA-2 USM SNMP is now with the IESG, so that should have been moved down, but it only happened, I think, yesterday or something, so I didn't update the slides. VMM MIB should be done soon. And we now have 3 drafts with the RFC editor. So I think we're moving along nicely, although I'm not sure if measuring working group performance by the number of documents is actually a useful metric. But that's what we're using because it works well. And we will now have Chris Grundman, if I can find the slides. Don't make it yellow. It's okay.
It's still yellow.
Yeah, I'll fiddle with it. Aha. Slideshow, play from start. And if you give me a second, I will get the colors right again. There we go. Do you want to use the cookie thing?
Okay. Yeah, so if you were in the IAPG meeting, you've already seen the slides at least. And really what I'm doing is, in Honolulu, I came and talked about a survey that the Internet Society did. Jan Zors talked about it in the meeting before that, when we were still conducting the survey. We basically went out and surveyed operators all around the world and asked them kind of what they knew about the IETF, whether they thought they should be participating or not, and then if they thought they should and weren't, why they weren't. Looking for barriers to entry, basically looking for the reasons why operators don't show up at the IETF in more numbers, in higher numbers than they do. Obviously, there's many folks here who do operate networks, but we think that maybe there could be a few more. And what we found was that there's probably a knowledge gap more than anything else. That there's a lot of folks out there in the operator community who, even the ones who use RTCs every day, don't know that they can come help rate them. Don't understand the fact that they can come and how open the process is and that they actually can come participate. So one of the first kind of tangible outcomes from that survey was what we're calling the IETF Help Desk. And just as the name may imply, what we're trying to do is provide a point, a physical point of presence at network operator group meetings around the world where folks can come ask questions. What is this IETF? Why would I want to participate? What are you working on? And how can I participate? So I wanted to kind of read back a little bit of what we've seen so far. We've done 2 of them at this point. We were at NANOG 63 in San Antonio, just not too far from here, in early February. And that one was what I would, at this point, call really successful. I also had a nice plenary spot first thing Monday morning to talk about what we were doing and the results of the survey. I think that helped quite a bit. And then the board and Betty there were kind enough to give us a spot kind of right outside of the plenary hall. So we had lots of traffic go by. And we did talk to quite a few people, many of whom came up and said, what is this IETF thing? How do I get started? Where do I start? Like I said, I had one gentleman who did come up and say, I've been reading RFCs for 15 years. I had no idea that I could come help write them. And like I said, and many people who asked, how do I start? Right, yeah. You knew they were there, but didn't know how they came, where they came from, I guess. That stork might have dropped them off. But, so that was really good. And we also had several folks who were a little bit more involved in the IETF come by, and it kind of was, again, a point where people could come talk about these issues. And we had some very good conversations about folks who had ideas on how we could get more operational input involved. And again, one of the things we stressed, that I stressed speaking about this in Honolulu, that I kind of want to bring back up is, I keep saying operators, and that's where we're focused. My focus in my work at the Internet Society is on operator outreach and kind of pushing technologies out to the operators. But I think a lot of the lessons we're learning here could play in developer communities or the DevOps world in particular, and other things. I mean, really what this is about is making it easier to come participate in the IETF, partially by making people know that they can. Apricot 2015 was held in Fukuoka, Japan, like 3 weeks ago, I believe. I probably have dates up there. I do not. About 3 weeks ago. That was, I would say, less successful, mainly because it's a little bit different format of a meeting. It's a much larger meeting. It's many meetings kind of put together, and they have a whole set of sponsorship booths. They have a kind of a trade show floor. And so because we want this to be more of a community effort and be self-sustaining over the long run, we chose not to put in money and be a sponsor at a booth in that area, which meant we kind of got stuck down by the registration desk, which in a 4-story venue where all the meetings were happening on the top 3 stories, being on the bottom floor didn't help with traffic very much. So we had less folks come up and ask about new entry and the how do I get started questions than we had at NANOG. But we still had several people come up and kind of want to talk about the IETF and how to make it better and how to improve things. And it still was a good place to hang out and have good conversations. There wasn't a plenary session either, which again may have kind of lessened the knowledge of people knowing that the help desk was even there. But we did have a BOF, and there was again some great conversation in the BOF as well with folks from the Asia Pacific region talking about these issues and kind of reaffirming that what we got in the survey was kind of a correct view of the world, which is that the things we saw in the survey are true, and kind of reconfirming that again. So that's good. What's next? I'm actually leaving here to go directly to Dubai for the Middle East Network Operators Group meeting, and we're planning on having a help desk there. The details of all that will still be worked out kind of on site, but that should happen. RIPE 70, I don't want the word refused to be seen as too strong. What basically is going on there is we're going to have a conversation in Amsterdam about how to move this forward in the future. They again are kind of in a situation where they have paid for sponsorship booths, and they don't want to set a precedent of just giving away, space in the meeting for free. So we need to work out how this could happen going forward. So there will be a conversation, but there will not be a desk set up in Amsterdam. But hopefully, maybe in the future, we'll have one there. From there, after RIPE 70, I'll be going to Bangladesh for the BDNOG in Dhaka, and we're going to have a help desk there as well. And then NANOG has kind of seen this as a win-win, and so we'll continue doing it. I actually left one of the IETF help desk banners with them, and so this will kind of hopefully keep going. We'll just need to make sure that there's volunteers to staff the desk at future meetings. San Francisco's the next one in June. I put a couple of the meetings here that are coming up, and really, again, the hope is that this spreads and if it's a good idea, that this spreads and happens at NOGs and NOFs all over the world. So if you or someone a colleague is attending one of these things, let's get it added to the list. We can ship you out IETF journals and a banner and help with the logistics of coordinating with the meeting planner and get these set up. So this is not limited to me flying around the world, hopefully, because I can't do any more of it than I already am, and hopefully can do a little bit less. We would really like to see, folks who go to both the IETF and an operator meeting helping out with this effort. So, there's a synergy mailing list, which is basically to talk about these efforts and coordinating that. So if you want to join the list, that'd be good as well. In addition to the help desk itself, there's also some other kind of at least semi-tangible things that have come out of all this. I think one of the ideas that keeps coming back up and that I'd like to see happen, so I'm just kind of seeding this idea, is providing IETF updates at NOG and other meetings. Again, developer or other conferences might be interesting, where you come in and say, hey, this is what the IETF is, this is what we're working on right now, here's how you get involved. I'm actually working within the Internet Society to develop a slide deck that kind of covers those points. They will probably make publicly available, so if other people want to do it, we'll have speaking notes and slides, and you can just grab the deck and go forth and get on the agenda for 10 or 15 minutes at one of these meetings and do that. I think that'd probably be really good, because again, I think one of the base problems here is awareness. IETF remote hubs is another idea that pops back up every now and then. I know the folks in Latin America, there's a group that are doing this already, and that idea seems to be a good one and something that may work in other regions of the world where folks can't all come to the IETF meeting, obviously, for cost reasons, and also I don't know that necessarily an IETF of 10,000 people would be a good thing in any case. So having people be able to listen in areas, especially places in Latin America, maybe Africa, Asia, and the Pacific, places in the world where connectivity isn't the greatest, it may be good to come together and have hubs or kind of regional meetings where they listen in on the IETF working groups and have local conversations in local languages. I don't know, there's a lot of stuff that could happen there potentially. We're working on a FAQ for technical folk. There's already a lot of interesting information out there for newcomers. The IETF's done a really good job of building the newcomers page. There's a video, there's a DAO of the IETF. The Internet Society built kind of a general frequently asked questions for kind of everyone, and we're trying to build one now from all that information specific to operators of, again, kind of how and why to get involved in the IETF. I think that as the IETF website redesign happens over the next, I don't know how long that's going to take. Those things usually take a while. But if we keep in mind this idea of lowering the barrier to entry, making it easier for newcomers to show up, being operator and developer friendly, so we can get back, not just people who are building boxes, but people who are using boxes in here. That would be good. And then also kind of a back in mind thing for me anyway, another project I work on at the Internet Society, which I think plays in this space, is the best current operational practices efforts that have sprung up all over the world. And I think that might have a way of bringing operators into the IETF fold, or at least making them more aware of what's going on here, how the process works, and may help to, again, get that kind of operational check on standards and protocols as they're being built out. And I think, yep, that is it. So I would be happy to take any questions or comments or further discussion of this. One of the big things here is, again, this is kind of just a readout of what we've done, but we really want this to be an ongoing conversation of improvement.
Brian Carpenter. I just thought I'd mention that the Edu team today sort of invented a new initiative at the initiative of Yari, that we should start doing basically short videos of this, that, and the other around the IETF, rather than relying on traditional long slide decks and documents for everything. And in fact, by a happy coincidence, I think Benoit is going to be the star of the prototype. because they were already planning such a video in the Yang space. And I think that needs to be coordinated with what you're talking about, because if we do those videos right, they would be wonderful material to, to provide to operators who say, what is this IETF thing?
Absolutely, that's great news. Thanks.
Lee Howard, early feedback from the LACNIC hubs seems very positive. I've been on the list for a few months now, the IETF LAC list, and I've just seen the first message that I could actually read because it was the first one in English, because I asked a question in English. But feedback's been positive. Something came up in, I don't remember where it was. We were talking about how network administrators, for like enterprise network administrators, use some of the same tools and aren't even as well connected to us as attendees at NOGS are. And can we do more outreach to enterprises somehow? I don't know where CIOs go. I mean, they don't go to Novell network conferences like I used to do when I was a network administrator. So where do they go? Microsoft, Cisco conferences probably. I'm sure there are others. And I don't want to overload you with work and more travel than you need to do, but I'd like to be keeping that in mind, that there are even more people who, both to whom we need to evangelize our products and say, look, we've already solved some problems that we think you're having. What other problems do you have, and can you help you solve them?
Great feedback and good points.
Oh, and a quick note as well. If you want to be on the Synergy list and are not, I don't know if we have the URL.
Because I did not put in the slides. That was a failure on my part.
No worries. You can talk to myself or Chris. We can point you at it.
All right. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. And now we have the CapWAP, this presentation, and then we have open mic, and then we're done. So folks might get some of their afternoon back. And you have 10 minutes. I'll let you know when you're down to.
Hello. My name is Genji.
Very close. Hold the mic.
I think you have to hold it closer.
Close. Okay. This draft we propose CapWAP control and data channel separation for multi-provider scenario. Actually, the current what we have is that the draft I listed here support the data and control channel separated for only single operator scenario, and this draft is extended to extend CapWAP to support the for the multiple operators. As shown in this figure, the current draft is only support. For example, it can transfer the only one AR IP address to the WTP, and then there are the data channel between the WTP and one access router. And our draft here is try to extend the scenario for the multiple operators. For example, it need to set up the data channel between the WTP and these maybe, for example, 3 access routers. Okay, next please. And here is an example. When the WTP attached to the network, it needed to set up the CapWAP session between WTP and AC. And during that session establishment, AC may provide the SSID and then the corresponding AR IP address to the WTP. After that, after the session establishment, then the WTP will establish the data channel between the access routers. So here, after the WTP have the address, and then the channel established, then we here in this in the multiple operated scenario, we will have the 3 tunnels between the WTP and ARs. So in this draft, we propose to AR will provide the SSID and the AR associate information to the WTP. Then the WTP can establish tunnels with different accessor routers. These accessor routers belong to different VNO. Okay, next. Actually here, it's a very minor change to the current draft, because for the current draft, only one SSID and the AR address, and then we extended the scenario to the multiple operated scenario. So the only change is that we propose that the AC will provide the AR and SSID associate information to the WTP. Then the WTP to use this information to establish the tunnels with different ARs. These different ARs belong to different operators. Okay, next please. As just discussed that the current draft has already support for the data and the control control tunnel. They are separated, and then WTP will have the access router IP address. And this draft is the change we had is that to provide the multiple SSIDs and AR IP addresses. So we think that it's a very minor change to the current draft. So I want to ask for the comments. Shall we merge with the current draft or go separately? Okay.
So I actually had a thing on that. I believe that the CapWeb alt tunnel draft has finished working group last call, and I think went through IETF last call as well. But it does seem to me, at least, as though this should be part of it. So I don't quite know what the process is. I'm assuming we could sort of pull it back from that. And we can say never mind. Yeah, we can say, dear AD, we asked you to publish it. Well, please don't, and merge it. Or maybe it could finish the process and we could immediately do a BIS, which seems incredibly silly. So, okay, like help abort. And do we have any authors of the current draft, of the alt tunnel draft, and in the room? And do they have any reason why we couldn't merge this into that?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of up to you if you think the other one is essentially completed by this or incomplete due to the absence of this or some variation thereof. Like, we could claw this back, I suppose. But, yeah. I mean, think about that carefully.
And you say you spoke to the authors?
Yeah, I talked with the authors, and he also asked the comments here on the meeting.
I'm just quickly trying to remember where in the status it is, so as soon as my machine connects. I think Benoit was the AD. Yeah, it was submitted for publication.
Yeah, I believe it's actually on the ISG agenda for like a week or two from now. I believe, because I think Benoit is going skiing and therefore I get to represent it or something similar. So it's pretty soon. Yeah. Yeah. No, scroll up and I'll drive your browser from here. Yeah, the history tab. Yes.
Would be nice if, there we go, that might help. But,
Yeah, so that's been reviewed at least once already because it was an AD follow-up. Yeah. So
There's much words.
I would probably not claw that one back if you have, unless you have a real desire to do so. I mean, if you do, well, then if this is important enough, then by all means do it.
Maybe this is a. We should have this.
Yeah, I think we should have a discussion with the authors of the current document, because it does sound like a pretty good thing to consider merging them, even if it's procedurally inconvenient.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we'll do what you have to. I mean, that's, and I'll support whatever decision you make, but.
We'll double your pay for the flexibility.
Yeah, appreciated.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So best thing to do would be for you to send a note to the authors and copy us.
Alrighty, and now once again we have open mic stuff, this time on Opsawg. Anybody? Anybody? Alrighty. We are ending early. Actually, I can't remember what time we're supposed to end, probably 5. But we're ending early and everybody can have some time back. Thank you very much. And whoever took minutes for the first part of this, please send them to myself or Joel, Benoit, or someone. Great. Thank you, everyone. Yeah. Oh, blue sheets. Please don't forget to finish the blue sheets. Kind of, yeah. The cable has issues. Pardon? Oh, blue sheets. Please don't forget to finish blue sheets. Thank you. And don't steal them. We're up to 7. Yeah, like I said, it's probably yours. Actually, it might not. Actually, that might not be true because that's what it says.
I mean, if you bought the 11-inch MacBook Air, the smallest one, then you really have no excuse for wanting to use it. If you come out with a smaller one, well, it'll be interesting to see how it
Is Jan Medved still around anywhere? Medved? There. No.